I would say that we have a very power-packed panel that brings perspective from the forefront of implementation and to understand what just transition would mean down at the ground. So I'm privileged to welcome our state panelists, Mr. Sujit Kumar. Sujit ji. Sujit ji is the Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. Mr. Ajay Kumar Rastogi. Mr. Rastogi is the Chairperson, Sustainable Just Transition Task Force, Government of Jharkhand. Mr. Kuldeep Chaudhary. Mr. Chaudhary is the Deputy Commissioner of Bokaro District in Jharkhand. Mr. Ram Babu Prasad. Mr. Prasad is the Director Technical, Central Coalfields Limited. And Mr. Ashok Srinivasan. Ashok ji is the Senior Fellow at Pranayas and Energy Group. And now our moderator for the panel, Mr. Anshu Bharadwaj. Mr. Bharadwaj is the Chief Executive Officer, Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. And over to you, Mr. Bharadwaj, to take the discussion ahead. He'll be moderating our session.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this very important panel on state-level action. I understand the previous sessions throughout the day have been extremely good, and they have focused on almost all aspects of the issue, including national level, state level, the issues in technology, finance, social issues. And I think it's appropriate that this panel takes a deep dive into where rubber hits the road, which is the states. We have already a bunch of extremely qualified people who can speak on various aspects of this issue, both political, technical, and social. We have people who represent the political class, the ones who have to face the people on these issues. Unlike people like us who do desk studies, they are the ones who have to answer to the public. And therefore, it will be wonderful to hear from them the ground realities. Friends, in terms of the format, what I propose is, given that we have just 1 hour of time, we'll request Shri Sujit Kumar ji to give opening comments for about 6 to 7 minutes, following which I will pose a few questions to each of the panelists. I'll request you, if you can please restrict remarks to about 6 to 7 minutes, so that then we can have about 12, 15 minutes for audience to pose questions to you. So I hope that's acceptable to all of us. So I'll request Honorable MP Shri Sujit Kumar to give the opening comments to set the ball rolling. Over to you, sir. You can speak from there.
For organizing these day-long interactive sessions on just transition. It's usually customary to invite a token politician in such sessions, whether they know about the subject or not. But nevertheless, I'm grateful to iForest for having me, and I'm certainly not an expert on these areas. But I guess I've been invited because very recently I had submitted a private member bill, first bill of such kind in the country, on the net zero emissions. So it was called the Net Zero Emissions Bill 2022. And I was very lucky to also have my bill balloted, which means this lottery of every private member bill that is submitted, and only the 5 get selected, and usually 1 or 2 of them get a chance to discuss the bill in the parliament for consideration and passing. But my luck ran short, and as you know, the parliament is hardly functioning. So on the 31st of this month, again, I will have a chance if the house runs that long, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But if we talk of just transition in India, I think as a nation, and of course the state governments will have to bring in policy interventions and development interventions, okay, to bring in this just transition from a fossil fuel based economy to a green economy, particularly looking into the concerns of the vulnerable communities, the tribal communities in particular, and those districts, blocks, or panchayats which are currently dependent on coal or on oil and gas and other fossil fuels. Now, we all know that most of the states are doing extremely well, and they have definitely introduced climate action as a priority. And they have integrated climate action plans in their annual budgets, and pretty much every state now has an annual climate change action plan. Even many states, in fact, had this plan even before India signed the Paris Agreement in 2015. And I come from the state of Odisha, and I belong to the Biju Janata Dal. And I'll tell you what government of Odisha has done, though I'm not here as a spokesperson of government of Odisha, nor as a spokesperson of my party, but it's factual and it's in public domain, so I can state that we introduced the renewable energy policy in 2022 in Odisha, and the stated goal of the RE policy of Odisha is to have about 10,000 megawatt of green energy by 2030. The current numbers are only 600 odd megawatt, and there is specific mention of just transition. I did not know that Odisha government had this foresight that there will be a conference on just transition, but they did have this phrase just transition. There is this phrase just energy transition in the policy 2022. And as you all know, Odisha is one of the leading coal producing states in the country, and there are districts, particularly Angul. Again, iForest has done extensive work in Angul, where there is a big chunk of population which is whose livelihood is dependent on coal. So it's apt that the policy of Odisha talks of just transition, because eventually Odisha will have to also to go for green energy and reduce its usage of fossil fuels. I'm recovering from a flu, so I'll keep coughing. Please bear with me. Now let me tell you about the private member bill which I had introduced, and why did I introduce that bill, and what are the salient features of that bill. Now we all know we have a very ambitious target of net zero emissions by 2070. Honorable Prime Minister should be lauded and commended for having this ambitious target. Under the NDC, our target is to reduce the carbon the emissions intensity by 45% of our GDP compared to the 2005 numbers. By 2030, we have committed to have at least 50% of our energy needs met from green sources by 2030. These are all like extremely laudable numbers. But who has seen 2070? I'm sure I will not be alive until 2070. So we need interim milestones. We need interim goals. We need blueprint and roadmap towards 2070. And this is precisely why I realized that there is no single legislation, there is no single comprehensive, holistic framework which cuts across different ministries, which cuts across the governance hierarchy from the center to the state to the districts to the PRIs, which provides a comprehensive framework to achieve this 2070 goal. And this is why I thought of introducing this private member bill, because the government had no such plans, or no such bill was no such bill was there, or no such law was there, or no such bill was also pending in the parliament. Now, so basically you can say that the bill, the private member bill which I introduced, wanted to address the policy gaps and prepare a roadmap for the Indian state to reach its 2070 goals through a just transition path. The salient features: first and foremost, the bill creates an accountability mechanism. Right now, what is the accountability today? Today, if any department or any public authority does not meet its emission targets, whatever it is, or does not meet its climate action plans or goals, is there any accountability mechanism? There is none. So my bill talks of empowering the National Green Tribunal, NGT, to fix responsibility on the government, on every public authority at every level. In case they, I'm sorry, in case they, can I have the water? My apologies. In case they fail in meeting the emissions target, whether interim or final, and it empowers the NGT to award cost, punitive cost. So this is the first instance of having an accountability mechanism, okay, and to make the government accountable for its climate actions. first. Second is the bill aims to establish what I call the Net Zero Commission, which shall oversee and advise the central government on the climate targets. And it will also periodically review the emission reduction plan. Again, the bill also talks of a plan at the national level, at the federal level, the state levels, and the district level. Today, the different districts, some proactive districts, we have Kuldeep from Jharkhand. He might be very proactive in having a district plan of his own in his district, but we do not have every district in the country having district plans, nor have every states outlined their own plans. So this bill talks of plans for every district, every district, every state, and also periodic review of this plan. It talks of an inter-ministerial coordination by having a nodal agency in every ministry. And finally, I spoke about the state and the district plan. To implement and execute those plans, you need the state and the district net zero councils, because this is a very localized subject. Though it's a global subject, it also has very, very strong local implications. So unless you have district councils and state councils who have intimate knowledge of the local context, I think the climate action plan won't go too far. So this is why my bill proposes to have district councils and state councils as well. Thirdly, integration of the climate risk into the financial stability framework. Today, tell me, if I give you a lofty proposal saying kindly put in $1 billion, you will get your return in 2070. Will you come forward? I don't think any private sector will come forward, because 2070 is too vague, too far too vague. So unless you have a holistic framework with strong legislation in place that talks of integrating the climate risks with the financial stability, I think that signaling to the market won't happen. And the private sector understands signaling. There are many experts here from the private sector. And as you all know, access to low-cost, long-term capital is key to meet the climate action goals. And also, it's a huge opportunity. It's a huge market opportunity for a country like India. It's a huge, this energy transition is a huge opportunity because it gives us the opportunity to leapfrog. And there have been studies which ranks India second out of 135 odd countries, emerging nations, in terms of its attractiveness for green energy and associated investments. So this is why this bill makes it attractive through proper signaling to the private sector, so that they will make capital available, they will make technology available, because they see a clear blueprint and a clear roadmap with interim goals. How many more minutes do you have?
I think they're done with this.
Sure. So done. Perfect. So I think I'll stop with that. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I really hope that the bill gets discussed in the House. We'll get to know next week. But even otherwise, I think the time has come for the Government of India to bring its own legislation. As you know, private member bill really do not get passed. In the history of independent India, only 14 private member bills have been enacted into an act. But my idea was to at least generate enough interest and get the government to think about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just pick up on the point which you mentioned and pose a question. Thank you for walking us through the logic behind the net zero bill and for taking a very ambitious step. Just two quick questions. That while a national level net zero 2070 has been announced, what do you see the sense at the ground level? At the state level, among the various stakeholders, do you feel that they understand what's the implication? Because clearly the implication means that at some point in the next 30-40 years, coal, oil, gas has to go. So do you feel that sense is percolating among the stakeholders, number one? And number two, how do you build consensus among the various stakeholders to move in that direction politically?
I don't yet see, I must be honest here, I don't yet see the kind of urgency or the kind of understanding. Yes, some state capitals do have, but again, it's restricted to the state capitals. This is why The bill also extensively talks of this district councils. It extensively talks of training and capacity building, creating a cadre of human resource personnel at the panchayat level. It talks of empowering the PRIs. Without the involvement of PRIs, we cannot ever succeed in meeting our climate goals. I say this with full conviction. So you can have as many plans, you can have as much aspirations as possible in Delhi and the state capitals, but unless you involve the local sarpanch, unless you involve the ward members and the councillors at the urban areas, this won't go too far. So this is why I have also in the bill itself there is extensive talk of having a robust and clear mechanism of involvement of the PRIs upwards. Now, to get the support, what you have asked, Mr. Bharadwaj, the people need to have a buy-in. And why will they have a buy-in? When bread and butter is an issue for most Indians, why will they think of 2070? Why will they think of 1.5 degree and so you need to create that urgency. And again, here I would like to give the example of the state of Orissa. Orissa being a coastal state and extremely vulnerable to cyclones. In the last 24 years alone, we have got 22 cyclones, small and big. So pretty much we are used to now having one cyclone every year. It's like a guest now. But everyone probably will agree that we have one of the best disaster management framework in the not in the country, in the world. Right. I'll again give the example of 99 super cyclone. In the year of 1999, we had a super cyclone where, as per official estimates, 10,000 people were killed. Unofficially, the number is put at close to 100,000. Over a lakh people died, apparently. We had another super cyclone of that magnitude in the year 2013 called Phylline. Again in the year 2019 called Fani. Guess what? How many people died in 2019 when we had Fani? 21. Every life is precious. I'm not demeaning the death of those 21 people. Every life is precious. But from 1 lakh plus, we came all the way to 21 because of our strong involvement of community in the disaster preparation mitigation framework that we have built, which has been recognized and lauded by UN, World Bank, you name it. So we need something similar. We need something similar to involve the local community. The sense of urgency, which was inculcated in the minds of the community members, that has to be done for climate action.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for sharing those views. Yes, I agree. A lot more needs to be done to build public consensus. I think the good thing about our country, India, is that regardless of which political dispensation is in power, climate action has found traction. Unlike in the case of, say, US, where every time a regime changes, there is a complete U-turn on climate. Unlike that, in our country, there is in general acceptability on, yes, we need to act on it. I will now request Shri A.K. Rastogi, who chairs the Sustainable Just Transition Task Force, Government of Jharkhand. Now, that's a very important initiative. I think that's the first state which has announced this kind of a task force, which shows that the state takes this thing very seriously and has the intent to talk about it. So I'll request you, sir, to talk about what was the rationale. If you can explain to us what thought process went in setting up the task force, what are the key agendas, and what do you expect as outcomes at the end of 2 years from the task force?
Good evening, everyone. I think first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Chandrabhushan for organizing such meeting. Now at least we have started talking about just transition. That's a good part. See why Jharkhand has taken a leap ahead to formulate just transition task force. Because many people may not be aware about the coal dependence in Jharkhand. If you look at, we have 24 districts in our state. Right now, half of the state is producing coal, and we produce around 30% of the country's coal. So dependence as compared to other states on coal-based ecosystem, it's not only the coal mining, it is the entire ecosystem which is based on coal. And if you look at the industrial development which has taken place in all the other districts, the major source of energy, it is a coal. 94% of our energy demand, it comes from the coal. If you look at electricity production, 94% comes from the coal. And we talk about transition, if we talk about national goals, transition is bound to happen, but it is not sure right now when it is going to start in India. It may be tomorrow, it's not about tomorrow, it is about the target is 2070. If you look at the GDP of the state, of these 18 districts, it is not the formal sector which is important to us, because Coal India, they employed 350,000 people, those who are dependent on coal and formal sector. When you talk about informal sector, it's not about coal miners, it's about transport, it is about the entire hospitality sector which has come in and around coal. So it is basically on coal-based ecosystem. When we move away from fossil fuel to non-fossil based economy or towards more greener economy, I think Jharkhand is going to be impacted, and the state has taken a right step to create awareness, to assess the magnitude and find a solution for it. To set up a dialogue. So it is not that you create a facility or you create awareness among the policy makers. It is more important to have a consultative approach that comes from the bottom. So what we need to do is, and what we plan to do is, we'll start from the districts. My colleague from Bokaro, he is also here. If you look at Bokaro, it is either the coal mining or it is a steel industry which depends on coal, or it is a thermal power plant. So entire job potential which is there, which has been created, largely it is on that system. So it is a time to assess informal sector. How do we take care? Because it is a welfare state. We cannot ignore our people, and we cannot allow our people to migrate towards other part of the country. And when we look at the green job creations, the transition will happen in East and Central India. But right now, RE potential is getting created in South and Western India. So how to create, because we have assessments, there are assessments that Jharkhand can have 18 gigawatt solar potential we have, but how to utilize that potential? Because if we have to move towards a greener economy, the dependence for renewable energy is going to be very critical for Jharkhand. Second, when this transition is going to take place, how do we repurpose the industry? If we are not repurposing the industry for greener jobs, I think the job is not done, or it is half done. And a major emphasis again would be on how to decarbonize industry, because Jharkhand cannot afford to lose its steel industry, which is consuming coal, not only for energy purpose, even for catalyst purpose. How do we find substitute fuel in blast furnaces? What could be? It could be hydrogen, it could be some other alternative. Then from where you are going to get these kind of lands? Because Coal India, being the largest land holding company in the state, when we talk about transition, then the land will be available. How do we repurpose? How do we create solar power? How do we create a club with wind energy? How it could be a biomass which can be converted? How it can produce biofuel so that greener jobs are created? an honorable member of parliament says that climate change, climate goals, if you have to attain net zero, then you have to tackle the transport sector also. Because if you look at Jharkhand, either within the mines or outside the mines or within the district, transportation we are using majority, it is a fossil fuel. So to attain net zero, there could be other alternatives that we can go for: carbon sequestration, carbon storage. People have been talking in earlier session, but right now there's a time to tackle moving towards cleaner transportation also. So basic idea of creating this task force is to recommend to the government what is likely to come and how it can be implemented in the state. Because policy can be formulated by the union government, but happening has to happen in the subnational level. So what we'll do, what we propose is to create a district level action plans so that data is created and there's a repository of the data, whether it is a formal worker or informal worker. Then based on that recommendations, we'll create a state level recommendation plan. Then how do we repurpose and how do we create a capacity within the people? Because it is about informal worker we have been talking. So how do we take care? Create a capacity or upskill them, creating a facility, creating a capability and capacity within the state. It is also going to be very, very important. What kind of a capacity is required? What kind of a skill is required? The skill which is suitable for greener market. So that kind of a skilling, reskilling or upskilling will also be very, very important. Yeah, I'll take only 30 seconds. Then how to implement it? From where once the dependence on coal-based ecosystem is going to decline, from where this gap funding is going to come. So I think the recommendation of task force will be hovering on and around these issues. And I hope that Jharkhand has taken a lead and will create certain models which can be replicated, because our dependence on coal is much higher than any other state. That's all. Thank you very much.
I'll pick up questions later after.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. I'll now request Shri Kuldeep Chaudhary, the District Magistrate and Collector of Bokaro, to share his thoughts. And I'll pose a couple of questions to you. Bokaro is an important area in terms of coal mining, and many coal minings are getting closed down. What challenges, social, economic, political, you see at district level? That's one. And number two, we have so far talked about national versus state level. Do you see a role for district level planning in handling these challenges? If you can please shed some light on that.
Sure, sir. Good evening, everyone. First of all, let me congratulate iForest for organizing such a great this dialogue and discussion while engaging experts and panels from across the globe, national level policy framework also, then coming to the district and state specific issues. When we see global just transition and just transition to be per se, there are different dimensions to approach the same issue, maybe academia also, climate change, environmental issues, then geopolitical issues. But from a district's perspective, coming from Bokaro, which is a typical sort of a district which has a large coal-based reserves also, and also a huge industrial setup in the Jharkhand, in the sense, as already Chairman A.K. Rastogi sir mentioned, that is, it has got a large Steel Authority of India's limited production plant, which contributes to around 5 million ton of the steel per annum. Also Vedanta, then Dalmia, ONGC, IOCL, BPCL, and several other industries. So when we talk about the energy production and the demand of the district and how to perceive this energy just transition thing, in district, when we talk about the energy production as the per se requirement and the capacity, we have around 4 thermal power station in the district, which contributes to around some 1570, let's say around 1500 megawatt power production in the district as of now. So when we talk about the transition, we need to understand one thing, that currently in our entire current national scenario, around 70 to 75% of the entire energy is coming from directly thermal power plants. So, and on the another hand, when we see that coal zones and coal mines and coal regions are going to deplete at a very faster rate in the districts in the field, so what will happen to that demand of the people with this energy? So first, before going to transition, we need to talk about the replacement of the energy generation. So when we go into the district in the field, as the district is blessed with the coal reserves, so is the blessed with the natural beauty of the dams, hills, and other natural beauty. So what we have done, we are going to identify one 1500 megawatt hydropower project in the district, and Damodar Valley Corporation along with the state government is going to do that very soon. So that is how we are going to replace at least the demand and the generation part of the district. Another thing is we have got a one large water reservoir in the form of Tenughar Dam, which has around 6,000 hectares surface area. So we can explore the possibilities of the floating solar power panel as a renewable source of the energy. So that is the one part which we talk about the transition, the replacement level. Now comes the second and the foremost complex and the most difficult part, how to cope up with the challenge of when we are going to have a scenario when coal mines and the reserves are going to deplete in the future in a very shorter period of time, let's say in 10 to 15 years. So the most difficult and the challenging part is to deal with the human resource, because in the previous panel also one of the gentlemen from the Union Party was also raising this issue. What happens in the coal mining related areas? The people who are working there as a formal or informal sector has a large dependence of their lives and livelihoods for the income on the coal or coal mining related activities. And over the period of time, it has been observed that unlike the other organized setup, there is a huge skewed or asymmetrical sort of demand supply gap in such coal areas. As it happens, there's always a huge supply of the labor who are low on the skill, low on their education, and it adds up to the advantage of their either outsourcing agencies or the contractors who always sort of get benefited out of the situation. So when we talk about a transition to a better source of the alternate source of the livelihood, or let's say energy, we need to do a very large set of the consensus mapping in the district also. Maybe we need some specialized agency for doing that, so that we can come up the resource mapping, skill mapping, then how we can take along those people to a different sort of the alternative source of energy or the economy we are talking about. That is the one thing. And now, as you mentioned, the second part of the question was that how district can come up with its own plan and to fund the entire transition thing. When as the coal bearing districts, we have got the royalty in the form of Pradhan Mantri Khanij Kshetra Kalyan Yojana. And when we talk about Bokaro, over the period of years till now, we have received around 900 crores in the district to develop the district in maybe on the front of social infrastructure, health, education, livelihood, and all other areas. And that planning is very decentralized planning as devised by the government of India and supported by states. That the planning comes as a bottoms-up planning where the people from the Gram Sabha, as Honorable MP was also highlighting, they come together and they devise, they pass a resolution in the Gram Sabha, then it rises up to the district level, where is a larger council or the governing body decides the entire plan, and then we formulate the policies. So in the terms of, let's say, contributing to the energy source on the alternative energy or the renewable energies, installing a major setup units like a solar panel or the floating solar panel, it requires a large amount of the funds and the functionaries. But we can definitely intervene in the sectors of the social infrastructure, let's say health, education, in your schools, Anganwadis, PSCs. And if I put up, just because I'm speaking on the behalf of my district, I have just done a basic calculation of the infrastructure regarding all these setups and how a distributed renewable energy source channel can come up and contribute to the energy demand. We have got around 2,200 Anganwadis in the district, around 1,500 schools, and sub 300 smaller and major health infrastructure, including all PSCs, CSCs, and district hospitals. And every institution has its own demand. Let's say a smaller one with a demand of 2 to 3 kilowatt, and bigger one with a demand of 5 to 10 kilowatt. And if we contribute the entire sum of the total energy demand, it comes around 10,000 kilowatt, which around 10 megawatt power production, which we can easily channelize, identify, and fund from our own district mineral fund resources. So that is how we can come up with the social infrastructure, and which we can fund from our own district mineral funds. That is one part which we can contribute from the DMF.
Thank you, Kuldeep. Thank you for explaining district level initiatives, in particular from the DMF. Those insights are really nice, especially in the education, health, and social sector. Thank you so much. I'll now shift to Ashok from Prayas Energy Group. Ashok has, of course, studied power sector a lot, both at national level and state level. So let me pose a couple of questions to you, Ashok. We are all talking about transition, in which assumes that we are going to phase down and eventually phase out coal. Now, at the same time, we are also talking about building coal power plants. There is talk that given the fact that every year summer is hotter than the previous year, and therefore demand for cooling is increasing very strongly, and we don't want to repeat what happened last year in terms of load shedding, etc. There are plans to build more and more coal plants in the coming few years. And also because this demand from various sectors is shifting to electricity. For example, from transport, we're adding to electricity with electrification. Is there a contradiction? Is there a transition? So what are we talking about? That's one question. And number two, what do you see a role of states? For example, you have examined Maharashtra in a lot of detail. What can a state do to accelerate transition given these national imperatives?
Yeah, thanks, Anshu, and thanks to iForest for inviting me here. I think it's been an exciting discussion through the day, and like you had said earlier, we are people who are sitting at our desks and doing something unlike, I think, all the other co-panelists that we have sharing the dais with, who are actually working on the field and have much more grounded experience. But I think it also gives us a little bit of advantage that we have a certain distance, which allows us to see the bigger picture a little better, hopefully. So given that, so to answer your first question, I think, in fact, I anyway wanted to bring in this point that one of the things that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about transition in a country like India and many other developing countries is that the transition is happening in the context of demand that is growing, which is very different from what is happening in most of the developed countries, I think. And the demand has to grow. I don't think any of us in this room has any doubts about the fact that a country like India needs to increase its electricity consumption significantly. What kinds of electricity consumption, who should consume it? Yes, those are valid questions to be asked, and we should discuss and debate them. But there's no doubt that our consumption has to increase. So that makes the problem even more challenging. So just to put some numbers to it, since it's also related to the question you asked, even if today we consume about 1,500 billion units of electricity a year, roughly. If it grows at 5% a year, you're talking of 75 additional billion units every year. Just to meet the incremental demand, you're going to need about 20 gigawatts of solar every year. Okay, so that's where the challenge is. So when we're talking about phasing down coal, we need to at least first get to a stage where we start meeting our incremental demand as much as possible from renewables. And then gradually, as the old coal plants reach their natural age of retirement and so on, and by that time newer technologies are there, newer capacity is there, and other sources such as batteries and other forms of storage are available, which will help us to transition to a newer electricity sector. So, I mean, this is very different from, to some extent, the question that you asked in terms of, I think, last year's summer spike and the kind of, shall I say, shortage discourse that it engendered is somewhat different, because I don't think last year's shortage in particular had anything to do with capacity shortage. That's the other difference that we need to understand, that the difference between capacity and generation is, I think these are two very different things when you're talking of electricity. And I don't think coal capacity in the country is too much of an issue. We do have some capacity in the construction pipeline at advanced stages of construction. They are going to come on stream because a lot of investment has gone into it. But beyond that, I don't really see too much need for new coal capacity beyond what is already in the pipeline necessarily for the country to come up. But that doesn't mean that the capacity that we have is necessarily going to get used all the time at full capacity and so on. The role of coal in the energy basket will gradually change. From a steady baseload provider, over time, it will gradually shift to a provider of, if not last resort, at least second resort to other sources of electricity. Even that will happen gradually. It's not going to happen overnight, as I think most projections show, including our own studies show, that even by 2030, coal is going to be the single largest producer of electricity in India. About half of electricity will come from there, which is a significant reduction from the 70% we have today. So it is a change, but it is a gradual change. So I don't think anything is going to happen overnight. And coming to Maharashtra in particular, I think your question was about what the state is doing in this. What can states do? Yeah. So I think states can do quite a bit, and I think colleagues on the panel have already talked about some of the things that their respective states are doing. Firstly, from the transition point of view, encouraging the transition point of view, I think, for example, I think many states have come out with state-specific renewable energy policies, which includes their own targets, which is in itself a first step, because the state is at least making clear intention of where they want to go. A second thing which not many states have done so far, but perhaps they can start thinking of doing, is in terms of also saying by when they are going to stop at least adding to their fossil fuel capacity. Many states, I believe, can more or less say that we are not going to add any more capacity. At least our studies indicate that you probably are unlikely to need any more capacity beyond what is in the pipeline. So even those kinds of commitments, I think, are very useful. And in terms of actual policies and schemes, I think one example from Maharashtra, which I have been talking to and we try to talk to most people we come across, is the kind of approach that we are taking to addressing the issue of agricultural consumers of electricity who, in a sense, as I think most people in this room know, one of the major hurdles to be crossed to address the transition to renewable energy is to address the whole DISCOM finance issue, because distribution utilities in the country and their financial challenges are a very important part. And one of the critical components of why distribution utilities are in a bad shape financially is because of agricultural consumers who are often subsidized, rightfully so in most cases, but as a result, the consumption is not metered, and there's also, given the current economies of supply to them, the amount of subsidy that needs to be given is significantly high, which makes things difficult. So given the kind of economies that we have now with solar electricity, one option to do is provide solar-based electricity to farmers, which is also politically a good thing to do, because it means you're assuring farmers of electricity in the daytime, unlike today, where they often get electricity in the middle of the night, because since they're not paying any money to you, supplying to them during the daytime is expensive. The utility is supplied to them in the middle of the night when it's cheapest to supply to them, which is not the greatest way of building trust between a consumer and a supplier. So moving to daytime supply, which will reduce the costs, and based on what we call as the solar feeder plant, small plants set up at the head of the feeder supplying electricity to farmers, will both improve trust between the farmer and the utility, bring down subsidies, bring down costs, and help you transition your way to renewables, help the utilities meet their renewable purchase obligations, has many, many advantages. This, of course, needs your agricultural feeders to be separated, which has happened in many parts of the country. So these kinds of approaches, which Maharashtra is kind of taking up on a fairly aggressive scale, are perhaps the way to go in terms of actually helping the transition to renewable energy by states. I'm not really gone into the issues of just transition, which is really what a lot of this discussion is about. I'm happy to touch upon those aspects from a Maharashtra point of view or other states' point of view, but maybe later, since I think I just heard the bell ring.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ashok. Thank you. I'll now last panelist, but not the least, because he represents Central Coalfield, a very important stakeholder, is Shri Ram Babu Prasad, Director Technical, Central Coalfields. So my question to you is that CCL has a reasonable number of mines which are temporarily closed and which have been classified as economically not really viable. How is CCL dealing with these mines? What are the plans? How do you plan to ensure that the workers and communities are taken care of when the mines actually get shut down? And what role can a PSU like CCL play in just transition in these areas?
Thank you, Vardhaji. And thank you, Chandrabhusanji, and all iForest team for inviting me on this occasion. But before coming to your question, because I represent the coal industry and the whole talk is around the coal. So let me have something about the importance of coal in the context of India and I am working in Central Coalfield Limited, which is one of the important subsidiary of Coal India Limited. And Coal India Limited is the largest coal company of the world. And this year, it is going to produce about 700 million ton of coal, almost about 70% requirement of the country. You know the importance of coal in context of India is accountable for 70% of electricity generation, 70 to 75%. So as on date, the importance of coal is very, very high in India. And in foreseeable future, the coal is going to be a king so far India is concerned. So my opinion is that the just transition for which we are talking about, it's a good idea. We must go for the just transition, but we should not be in a hurry. So far India is concerned, because lot of challenges are there if we will go in the hurry. On the coal industry, Coal India employ about 230,000 direct employee. Indirectly, about more than 6 to 7 lakh people are dependent on the coal, who are working in the mines. In addition to that, large number of people are dependent upon the industry, as mentioned by Kuldeep Saab, which are based on the coal. So it's not an easy task. So we must move slow, have a careful thought, have a proper planning, and it should not be at very fast please. And so far your question is concerned about the mines. I will tell about the earlier there was low demand of the coal, due to which all the planning were done in the coal industry to take out the coal in the easiest way, and the coal were taken out from the upper seams. Still in most of the mines of the Jharkhand, the lower seam has not been touched. So whatever mine has been closed or abandoned or discontinued, the reserve has not exhausted, for your kind information. So now we are planning to combine all these small mines and making a bigger mine, for which project report are under preparation. And we will definitely revive those coal mines. Some of the coal mines were closed because of non-profitability. There was a challenge because the manpower was huge and profit was not coming out. Now we have offered, the Coal India is offering coal on revenue share basis. We are offering our coal mine, our coal asset to general public. You come and you produce and you give me at least 4% revenue, and you take the 96% revenue. So on this model we are working. I am happy to announce that one of the mine in the Bharat Coking Coal Limited, that has already been awarded to one of the bidders. In Central Coalfield Limited also, 3 mines are in pipeline, and we are going to award to the private entity on the revenue sharing basis. So all mines which have been abandoned or discontinued are going to be revived, because our coal demand is high. But just transition is important, and as you tell, what Coal India can do in just transition. So you know the Coal India has huge chunk of land. In Central Coalfield Limited, around we have 86,000 hectares of land, including the forest land. This huge chunk of land can be repurposed. We can think of, with the help of the state government, what they are going to do that. So we can think of that, how we can repurpose that land. We are also working with the World Bank. I think Madam Mani Khurana from the World Bank is sitting here. She has visited the Central Coalfields Limited number of times. And we are working on that, how to go for repurposing of that. In addition to that, as we are well aware, due to climatic action or due to pressure or due to some commitment made by at the world level, the coal is going to be phased out. So already CIL has taken a lot of initiative in diversification. That has been done already. We are also going to have number of initiatives like solar panel, we are investing in the solar program also, like other PSU also. The NTPC is taking lead. So number of initiatives are being taken so that we should not left behind and we should go with the just transition process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, friends, you heard all the panelists talk about their respective areas. We have about 10 minutes for audience questions. So, what I suggest is, if we can collect 2-3 questions, you can pose to the panelists, and then they can answer. Yes, I see a hand right behind. Please go ahead, all the way back. If you can introduce yourself and address the question to the concerned panelists, please.
Yes, my name is Asmita Kabra. I am a lapsed economist and also on the board of the India Just Transition Center. I just wanted to, something that's striking me constantly hearing all the presentations today, we are talking about two separate wicked problems. Justice is a wicked problem. Transition is a wicked problem. And when we are trying to solve the two simultaneously, it becomes unmanageable. So people are either talking about energy transition or they are talking about justice, but how to do the two simultaneously is a problem. Do you think it's possible to delink the two? And because justice is something that needs to happen at the subnational and even lower scales. Whereas when we're talking about energy transition, we're talking about the scale of the nation at the very least, most of the times. So trying to do these two together, maybe we can just think of ways of identifying the communities and people that are affected and think of the justice issue separately, because the current system's already not very just to them. Transition is going to make it much worse, but trying to solve these two simultaneously to me doesn't seem like something that we are necessarily, conceptually we shouldn't be married to
If you
that
can just
idea.
please keep it brief, I will pick up 2-3 more
That's my
questions.
question.
Any more?
Anyone
Yeah.
who wants to pick it
I
up.
see a hand there, yeah.
Thank you. This is to anyone who wants to talk at the state level specifically. When we're talking about just transition planning, several of you have identified that this is not a now issue, but it's something that's likely to emerge in the, say, decades to come. My question is, how can state district authorities optimize planning such that you can support communities and district authorities to do economic diversification planning as it emerges? And can that be something that's that becomes a planning issue, especially for states where you're seeing a likely phase down or phase out from coal impacting?
Okay, we'll take one more question. Yes, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rahul Banerjee. I'm the managing director at Risana House. We are a youth-led think tank. So just an idea that something my colleagues at the Swedish Embassy as well as Volvo bombarded me with this morning. We are speaking about just transition. I will be taking out just for a moment and just focus on transition. So this is a fact that coal is here to stay for at least a decade more. So an idea, most of the emission in coal mining is because of mobility issues, transportation of coal after mining. So is there a plan in order to decarbonize the mobility sector, in order to adopt ideas like electric vehicle or green mining plans?
Sure, thank you. So I'll take the liberty to add one more question as moderator. I'll take that liberty and I'll pose it to Shri Rambabu Prasad. I take your point that today coal is a dominant source of energy for the country. Yes, we all know that. India has also announced a net zero 2070 target, which means at some point coal will have to be phased down. Given that, any thinking on what that time frame might be? So I agree that it should be slow and manageable, but any thinking on what that time frame might be? Now, given those 4 questions, I would request any panelist to please respond. Feel free to pick up and respond to.
As far as Jharkhand is concerned, I think I can touch upon everything. As already told you that the task force idea is to assess what is going to be the magnitude, because sooner or later coal is going to be less relevant because other sources of energy are going to be much more cheaper. So it's not that we will face it is going to be automatically, economically, it's going to be less viable option for the industry and consumer. And to add what Ashok has said, see, we are a developing nation. We need to work on energy security of the country as well as energy security of the state. That has to be kept in mind. So what is the alternative? So that is why the target is pretty longer, and just Jharkhand has added another word called sustainability. It's become more complex. Sustainability, justice, and transition. These three things are pretty complex. I think transition is to be tackled in totality, not in isolation, because happening has to happen in the subnational level. Policy framework can come from the central, guidance come from the union government, but it has to happen in the state at subnational level, and capacity and capability to be created within the state. Because even if you have to take care of the people, that is to be taken by state. Like my friend from Bokaro here said, if we have to create a RE potential, it has to be taken in the state itself. So the capacity and capability to be created, but I don't see that it should be, they should be, two different things. One, transition. Right now, there are various schemes of Government of India. We do take care of socially we do take care. But the impact, economic impact of coal relevance getting reduced, or other sources of energy becoming more relevant economically, I think then the issue of capacity creation, capacity and recapacity creation, only then you can give them some jobs so that economic stability is there. Thank
you. Just to add and partly respond to ma'am's question from behind, is I agree that obviously justice is a wicked problem in itself, and there's a lot of things one can debate that for a lifetime perhaps in itself, and climate and transition is a wicked problem in itself. But I think the reason why we're talking about these two together is that, in a way, as I think you also mentioned it, the transition exacerbates some of the justice issues that already exist, and it makes them worse, and that's why it's in a way almost necessary to adjust to talk about them together. That is one reason. And second reason is, in a way, one could look at this because the transition necessitates you to reimagine so many things, including, as we've been talking, development planning and the kind of future that people and communities are going to have. One can also look at this as an opportunity, as various people have said, to not only create new kind of possibilities, but also address some of the existing and past injustices, and of course learn from past mistakes to try and not repeat them while we are doing this transition. And the last point I would want to add why we need to combine them is perhaps a very utilitarian view of things, is that if we as a society want the transition to take place, the more we try to make it just, the more efforts we take it, the smoother the transition will be. Otherwise, you're naturally going to run into frictions and difficulties in actually getting the transition through. So even from enabling the transition point of view, I think it's necessary to bring in the element of justice to the extent we can, so that people are part of the transition movement and not felt that it's imposed on them.
Just I will add an answer to the first question. You see, the energy transition and just transition, both are not contradictory to each other. Rather, both terms are married to each other. Just is being talked when you will transit from one source of energy to another source of energy. So far, India is concerned, as mentioned by the member from the Niti Aayog in the last panel, 86% of our energy is dependent on the fossil fuel. And similarly, lakhs of persons are dependent on those fossil fuel industries. So if you will change from the fossil fuel energy sector to another form of energy sector, how you are going to address the problem faced by the stakeholders? You see, there are 3 or 4 stakeholders. Number one is the people and the person who are associated with, who are working with the industries. Number two, government itself. Government is also a stakeholder. As on date, huge number of fund is going in the name of royalty, DMF, NMET, number of taxes. So how the funding of the government will be addressed if we will switch from the prevalent energy sector to another energy sector? So how that will be addressed? Another stakeholder is the nature itself. How you are going to address the demand of the nature? So all things have to be taken into care, and the proper planning is required. How we are going to address the issue being faced by the different stakeholder, then only justice can be given. Thank you.
Let me respond to the planning issue that was raised. There's something called VDP, Village Development Plan, and then there is GPDP, Gram Panchayat Development Plan. Every panchayat has to pass the VDP and the GPDP through the Gram Sabhas, which is then integrated into the block development plan and then eventually into the district development plan. So I did say during my intervention that unless you involve the PRIs, particularly the sarpanches, no amount of policy intention or intervention at Delhi or at the state capitals will succeed in the climate action. So you need to ensure that every VDP and GPDP talks about the climate goals for that village or for that panchayat, and integrate that into the planning process. I think that's inevitable. Now going back to the just transition query that was raised, I agree with my panelists here. Why do you need to delink transition from justice? They are two sides of the same coin. I mean, unless you have just transition, I think it's not sustainable. So I think enough has been said that when you leapfrog into a new era of green energy from fossil fuel based energy, it has to take everyone along. Otherwise, there will be no buy-in. So the nature of the transition itself has to ensure that there is justice embedded in the process. So I think we need not decouple the two. We need to take both because otherwise you are falling into the trap of making it sequential. So what I understand is that let's transition into a green economy or a green energy system, and then we'll ensure that it's inclusive. I don't think that is desirable, and that's going to happen. So.
Referring to the question of transition and the equity, as the ma'am has highlighted, as I also mentioned in my earlier discussion, that transition is going to be inevitable, whether by technological intervention or the growing demand across the world for power and the growing different dialogue and discourses. It is going to be there. But now the onus lies on the state governments and the government and the district authorities, whether if we plan the entire thing carefully, if we start early, as thankfully our state government has set up the task force and we are going to proceed in this direction, and we take along all the stakeholders, whether they're technological intervention or the plants and industries which are directly or indirectly dependent on the conventional sources of energy, whether those communities, their livelihood issues, and also the implementation wing of the system who's going to execute the policies and the plan at the district level. For example, I want to highlight a very basic limitation we face in the district. We talk about the alternative source of the energy and renewable source of the energy. For every another scheme or the departments in the state or the union, we have one representative in the district, that we have the line functionaries in the terms of health, education, social welfare, livelihood, and other sectors. But for energy in particular, we do not have any renewable energy representative or expert in the district. We still rely on the state level agency. As Jharkhand, we have this JREDA, Jharkhand Renewable Energy Development Authority. So it becomes really challenging at times to discuss with them, engage them for any micro level plan in the district. So we need to tackle a different kind of the dynamics to come up with a very holistic and integrated sort of plan, so that the plan become the systemic plan. It doesn't become a person specific plan that a particular person in the district or the authority is leading, and that's why it's taking forward. And another thing is we should start early, so that we can make sure that all the people who are at the receiving end of the system or who are otherwise the most vulnerable part of the section come along, so that this inevitable transition become a just transition for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, I'll have to bring this session to a close. We could have gone on and on with this fantastic discussion, but we are just 5 minutes over time, so I'll have to bring it to a close. It's difficult to summarize the discussion because we heard so many diverse perspectives, but in just 2 minutes, one thing which we heard, which links to the previous session, was the close coordination between center and states is important. What the center decides on overall transition should be closely linked to what the states do. We heard that the role of states is extremely important, especially those areas which have deep economies in fossils. So we heard that. We also heard the important role districts should play in social sectors, in particular education, health, and Anganwadis, the very important role districts can play. And we also heard even panchayat levels to build more ground support for climate action. Important to engage the panchayat, sarpanch, and train them and equip them, not just in mitigation, but also in aspects of adaptation, resilience, extreme weather events to build more acceptability for climate action. So with that, I'll bring this to a close. I sincerely thank all our panelists for sharing their rich perspectives and their thoughts. And I do hope that this dialogue continues. Thank Chandrabhushan and iForest for organizing this session on state level action. Thank you very much.